At that time the Pharisees went and took counsel how to entangle him in his talk. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true, and teach the way of God truthfully, and care for no man. For you do not regard the position of men. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the money for the tax. And they brought him a coin. And Jesus said to them, Whose likeness and inscription is this? They said, Caesar's. Then he said to them, Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard it, they marveled, and they left him and went away. The same day the Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, and having no children, left his wife to the brother. So to the second and third, down to the 7th. After them all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, to which of the 7 will she be wife? For they all had her. But Jesus answered them, You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, you have not read what was said to you by God. I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowd heard it, they were astonished at his teaching. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they came together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Jesus, Teacher, what is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Now, while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them a question, saying, What do you think of the Christ? Whose son is he? They said to him, The son of David. He said to them, How is it then that David, inspired by the Spirit, calls him Lord, saying, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand till I put your enemies under your feet. If David thus calls him Lord, how is he his son? And no one was able to answer him a word. Nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions. Then said Jesus to the crowds and to his disciples, The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So practice and observe whatever they tell you, but not what they do. For they preach, but do not practice. They bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with a finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by men, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long, and they love the place of honor at feasts and the best seats in the synagogue, the salutations in the marketplaces, and being called rabbi by men. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brethren. And call no man father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called masters, for you have one Master, the Christ. He who is greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut the kingdom of heaven against men, for you neither enter yourselves, nor allow those who would go in, nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you transverse sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of Gehenna as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So he who swears by the altar swears by it, and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it, and by him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God, and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without neglecting the other. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and on the plate, but inside they are full of extortion and rhapsody. You blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and of the plate, that the outside also may be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear to men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you witness against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers, you serpents, you brood of vipers. How are you to escape being sentenced to Gehenna? Therefore I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, that upon you will come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of innocent Zacharias the son of Barachiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all this will come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is forsaken and desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. What a blessing it is on this, the second evening of our Holy Week services. We celebrate the second of the Bridegroom services. As we know, our community is blessed to have a pastoral assistant, Mr. Ron, who is a seminary graduate, and with such has the blessings of the church to preach. I've asked Ron to please deliver us some wisdom on this evening.
Thank you, Father. Who is the Christ? Who is the Christ? This question lies at the heart of our faith, and our answer to it determines our identity as Christians. This question is central to the events of Holy Week and also to the gospel reading tonight. In the gospel reading, the Pharisees are seeking a way to set a trap for Christ with their questions. First, they send the loyal servants of King Herod to ask Christ, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Then come the Sadducees asking what they think to be a tricky question about the resurrection. Finally, one of the Pharisees themselves, a lawyer, speaks up and asks Christ, which is the greatest of the commandments? Each and every time, Jesus, knowing the intentions of their heart, manages to turn the trap that has been set for him around on the person who's asking it. And then, after doing this 3 times, Christ asks his own question. He says, what do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? The Pharisees answer, he's the son of David. But Christ asks a follow-up question. He says, well, if that's true, if the Christ is the son of David, how is it that he calls him Lord? And then Christ, what he does is he quotes one of the Psalms written by King David, in which King David has this prophetic vision in which he sees the Christ elevated to the right hand of God. And in this vision, King David hears, he says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand and I will make your enemies your footstool. And so Jesus says, if David calls him Lord, how then is he David's son? The Pharisees don't ask Jesus any more questions after that. So there's something in the answer that is given that is not enough, that is missing something. It doesn't go far enough. There's another place in St. Matthew's Gospel, the same Gospel which we read tonight, in which Jesus asks a similar question to a different group of people. he asks his disciples much earlier in his ministry, "Who do you say that I am?" And St. Peter famously replies, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Now Jesus seems thrilled with this answer. He says, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." So we might be thinking, well, there's the answer to our question. However, in the very next passage, Jesus begins to describe to his disciples how he is to go to Jerusalem, how he is to be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and how he is to be killed, and how he will rise from the dead. And Peter says, "Far be it from you, Lord," basically saying, no way, this shall not happen to you. And Christ says something to St. Peter that is even more harsh than the words we heard him use to the Pharisees tonight. He says, "Get behind me, Satan." So again, it appears that there's something in St. Peter's answer that is lacking, that does not go far enough. The ultimate answer to the question, who is the Christ, is given by Jesus himself. And it's not given through his words, but through his actions, specifically his passion, his crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection, the events of this very week. If we want to be able to answer for ourselves the question, who is the Christ, then we must follow Christ in taking up his cross and marching toward crucifixion. And if we can follow him at least that far, then we can also follow him into the resurrection. Please continue to participate as much as you are able in the events of this week as we witness to Jesus' own answer to the question, who is the Christ?
Thank Ron for the beautiful wisdom which he offered to us this evening. I ask everyone to please come forward at this time to venerate the icon of the bridegroom and to go home in peace. As we know, we'll regather here tomorrow evening for the third of the bridegroom services, once again at 6:30 p.m. May God be with us this evening and always.